when we talk about energy and masculinity, I think it is less masculine of you to not be brave and courageous enough to be able to face yourself.
Bravo.
Right?
Well said.
Because men sit here and they talk about bravery and courage and all of this stuff, but if you can't face yourself in your deepest and darkest and depths of truth, then are you really a man?
So, and I equate this to the man looking at himself in the mirror.
Yeah.
What do you see when you look in the mirror?
Yeah.
What makes you scared of what you see? What makes you happy? Are you truly confident? Are you truly at peace?
Yeah.
And if you're not, are you taking the steps to fix it?
Well, that's what's interesting, right? Because the projection of peace is put on the woman.
So, you know, from going into the jungle and summoning mountains, you know, deep diving into the human mind, literally and figuratively, and also coaching men on masculinity.
Yeah.
As a, if you don't mind me saying, a good-looking female. So where did that come from? Give me a little bit of your background, because I'm intrigued. You know, I see something like this, and I see somebody who, you know, as an attractive woman and who is going into and targeting men specifically on their masculinity, which I understand because there's a crisis right now in masculinity, not just in the West, but also, I mean, we're here in Dubai.
Yeah.
You know, and give me some of your background and where this came from.
I feel like it chose me.
Okay.
And so it shocks me and fascinates me as much as the next person. Since moving into the coaching and mentoring space, which was about 6 years ago now, well, actually, pan out, throughout my life, I've always very effortlessly magnetized very powerful men into my life, which has been very interesting because I sort of come from this very low socioeconomic, single mother, only child sort of space.
Okay.
Very far removed from that space.
Yeah, sure.
Almost the opposite. And so it was very interesting throughout my life. I would just very easily, effortlessly bring these people into my life. They were pulled towards me. And so it's only been in the last few years that I've actually begun to lean more into that as I decide to live on more my path of truth, which I call God's path. I've been a lot more cognizant and connected with what I feel like is coming into my life without me forcing certain things. And that's been one of the things. And so at the start, there was a little bit of this like resistance within me because I obviously was like, I'm this like bubbly, like blonde female, like what the hell do I have to mentor powerful men?
Sure.
And what I recognized is, and this is how I like to articulate it now, is like men go to men for structure and strategy. Men come to me for truth.
Truth in what perspective?
In the way that I'm able to, and this is something I'm also leaning more into being more public about, is I believe that God has given me a gift to be able to feel the unseen. And being able to effortlessly be in these spaces of powerful men, I'm able to feel underneath the facade of conviction, particularly around masculinity.
So the facade of conviction or the facade of what people think is masculine now? If you understand what I'm saying.
More the first point. So,
Okay.
and that's more the men that I work with, is I feel like, and I think this is part of the integration process. So I'm not judging. It's just I help in moving this space along to like a deeper sense of power, in the sense that I think when masculine men, genuine masculine men, are coming out in this space like yourself, right? And you're being able to teach certain things in the way that you believe are important to share because they have been suppressed. What I have found is a lot of men are open to receiving, but they don't integrate, they parrot. Parrot meaning they say what they hear, but they don't actually apply it. And so when I go into rooms of powerful men, I feel the authenticity and I feel the fragmentation.
Okay.
And so what I enjoy doing is being able to work with men with that fragmentation piece. So I like to say I like to guide powerful men into standing in their power, not the performance of it.
Understood. So can you define, because this is also very contested.
Yes.
Can you define for everyone from your perspective, what is a masculine man? Because you just identified me as one. How do you know I'm one? How do you know that someone isn't? How do you know that someone has the facade? Sure.
Energy.
Can you define it in a way where other people can quantify what you mean? I know it's hard.
It's difficult, and I think that's an interesting aspect of it. I've had a former partner who we got to a point in our relationship where I was becoming unfulfilled. And he's a very self-aware person, a very open-minded person. We're having this, conversation about like, what is it? How can we begin to come back into connection with each other? And I said to him, and this is a few years ago, I need more masculinity. And so him being
Gary, my heart hurt.
Yeah.
I'll just punch you right in the gut.
And you guys say about open communication is important.
Listen,
honesty is important.
I completely understand, but oh my goodness, as a man.
Well, I'm all about radical honesty, and we can talk about that as
100%.
well. I think it's the way that you deliver it, and I delivered it in a,
sure,
in a way that I was seeking
way,
connection.
in a loving way.
What I found interesting about that was that he responded, actually very grounded, and said, well, what does that look like to you? And that sent me on a journey of understanding that I found it very difficult to articulate. Because if I'm to articulate behavior or the way that you speak, but you're not in alignment with that,
yes,
it's not masculinity. So as much as the energy is difficult to be tangible in the way that I defined, that's the answer.
Yeah.
Is that the energy is the full circle of what masculinity is. Because I walk into rooms, I've been in certain rooms, even in Dubai, where you have 50 high-achieving men. And very quickly I can discern between the people that are very grounded in what they preach and the ones that are looking at me, and I can see the chapter of the book that they are referring to in the way that they're communicating with me.
Got it.
It's not the same thing. But say if the grounded masculine man versus the man is still integrating, or maybe not even integrating, are doing the exact same behavior and saying the exact same thing. But if the energy is not grounded in what they're doing, it's not the same thing.
So how can someone, okay, so if you feel energy.
Yeah.
All right, which is, I love this because I do the same thing.
Yeah.
I feel energy in people. I can tell, and I can kind of do the same thing. I wonder, I never really thought about it in a lengthy perspective of how I can tell if a man is masculine or a woman is feminine, or if I can, see a little bit of negative energy. I very much know how to read people. Maybe it's my 12 years in law enforcement, or I can see negatives, but I can also see positives.
Yeah.
I see you're very light and airy and flowy, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You're obviously bubbly from your outward appearance, but from the inside, I could tell that you're just warm and kind, right? You have a kind demeanor about you.
Most times.
Yeah, most times. Until you piss her off.
Yeah.
Listen, that's every woman. Every woman has a little bit of fire in them.
Yeah.
They're
I'm not going to sit here and.
Yeah. They're supposed to. If you're not just going to be that mundane, right?
Totally, of course.
So how can we help the people that are watching and the people that are consuming this content? And thank you again for coming on the show.
Hey, you're welcome.
How can we give them some kind of quantifiable data? Anything that we can kind of show them? This is what you look for. This is what you can see. If you maybe can't feel that energy, if you're not in tune to it.
I feel like the starting point, and this is actually where I start with my clients.
Sure.
First session is always speak that which you fear to admit.
Ooh, I don't want to do a session with you. Scared.
It's for the brave.
It's for the brave. Yeah. Okay.
But that's the space in which I think is important to start, because we all, by virtue of being human, myself included, we have aspects of ourselves that are hidden by our persona, very intentionally, right? There are aspects of ourselves that we feel uncomfortable to be able to speak out loud. But I find that's where the suppression of real power is, because at any point that we are suppressing anything within us, we are fragmenting ourselves. I like to say congruence is power. So in the way that I energetically feel myself and other people, it's like this energetic wave is moving through people. I call it God's path or universe's path or the path of truth. And my role is to be able to guide people back into alignment with that as much as we can. And so we deal with the fragmentation. So I'd speak to the people with something sense of tangibility is be honest with yourself.
That's really hard for a lot of people.
But that's the point.
Sure.
Because this is the thing, right? I'm not going to be here and tell you how to goal set or how to strategize in your business. Like, you've done that, right?
Yeah.
And most men in powerful rooms have. The aspect in which they don't realize is actually weakening them is the aspect in which they cannot be honest with themselves. And so when we talk about energy and masculinity, I think it is less masculine of you to not be brave and courageous enough to be able to face yourself.
Bravo.
Right?
Well said.
Because men sit here
Looking
and they
in the
talk
mirror.
about bravery and courage and all of this stuff. But if you can't face yourself in your deepest and darkest and depths of truth, then are you really a man?
So, and I equate this to the man looking at himself in the mirror.
Yeah.
What do you see when you look in the mirror?
Yeah.
What makes you scared of what you see? What makes you happy? Are you truly confident? Are you truly at peace?
Yeah.
And if you're not, are you taking the steps to fix it?
Well, that's what's interesting, right? Because the projection of peace is put on the woman. I've met so many men.
I have done this. Okay, I've done this. I will totally admit this.
I need a woman at home to bring me peace.
So I never said to bring me peace. Let me explain
peace,
because I feel bad
peaceful.
now.
Yeah, I feel like it.
No. So I mean, I've never thought of a woman to bring me, because I'm very peaceful by myself.
Yeah.
But I guess I've asked to not bring me more chaos.
Yes.
So be my peace at home.
Yes.
You know, if that makes sense.
If it's integrated, I understand.
Okay.
And it's beautiful, and I understand it. But most men that say, I need a woman to don't bring me chaos, don't bring me joy, I need peace. It's a projection because they're out there performing. And when they get home, they're tired of performing and they can't deal with chaos. They need peace to be able to reground, re-energize for the next day.
Is that right or wrong or indifference, or what do you think?
I think it's not taking enough self-responsibility on yourself and stop projecting your own weaknesses onto another person, particularly the person that you say that you love.
Damn it. Gary, she's called me out. She did. So I say that. I've said that. I've even made reels on this, and I'll admit it.
I've watched your reels.
She's like, no, I was coming here to...
You did your research, I did mine.
Listen, I love that you said that, though, because I always look at ultimate self-responsibility.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's almost like you don't know what you don't know.
Totally.
Until you're kind of called out.
And that's why sometimes you can work with people, right?
Yeah,
because and that's what you're speaking to is like, what can people do now? Well, there's an air in which you can do this yourself, but you only know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
And sometimes that's why it's useful to work with somebody else that is able to reveal those blind spots within you. But you have to want it.
Yeah.
And that's where I work as well. I'm not here. And this is why I call myself a mentor, no longer a coach. And even mentor is like a bit whatever. But it's like, I am not here to convince you to be more powerful.
Okay.
If you come to me, I will reveal where I feel you are fragmented and you can come back into alignment. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you have to.
Sure.
This is on you.
Well, they're coming to you.
You're
not seeking them out.
But you would be surprised when people come to me and sometimes there's still pushback because we go to the bit that they don't want to face.
Yes.
Right? So there's resistance. But I find what's really powerful is like, I'm not going to take ownership for that resistance. That's on you. I'm still going to sleep really well tonight. But you've come to me for a reason. So now it's on to you whether you want to face it and deal with it or not. You can go back into your life and suppress it. But there's a seed. And then that seed is going to get louder and louder as you progress against life. And you realize that there's always patterns to reveal where you're not free. So it's like at the point that if you refuse to begin to integrate something that's been shown to you, life will continue to provide you people and circumstances to reveal that this is a part of your life that it's time to face and integrate.
Patterns. There's patterns.
Yes.
Yeah, pattern recognition and patterns of behavior that maybe doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
But we find comfort even in negative patterns because they are familiar.
Absolutely.
You know?
And that's a lot of what's got to do with the speak that which you fear to admit, I feel like. Those are the hardest parts that we have found safety in at some point. and are now becoming aware as we get older that those patterns that once served us may no longer serve us. Yeah. And that's really difficult because that's shifting your whole identity and relationship with yourself and how you move in the world. Yeah. And you're opening up yourself to a space in which is very vulnerable because you're stepping into the unknown. But this is what I find is that if we don't move into that space, life will provide the void for you to do that. And it's rough.
Yeah.
And it's dark and it's hard. And I know that you've been through moments in your life. I certainly have been through moments in my life that life will just hit you over the head really fucking hard and be like, it's time to now face this thing. And so that's what I also work with is like I can work with optimization, but also I can work with when you haven't listened and you come back and you're at the bottom of the pits and we work up from there.
What's the number one thing you're dealing with in men that you're coaching or men that are in powerful positions? And I want to specifically speak about the powerful position part because I think, all men have work to do, obviously.
Yeah.
But people put the wealthy or the successful on a pedestal. And we're all just men.
Yeah.
We're all just women. We're all just men.
But it's interesting because you can say that, but people that haven't moved in those spaces don't quite understand that.
Yeah.
They really put you on, and myself included, like I laugh and I say like, I used to pedestal, particularly men, so much. And that was part of my lesson in relationship to what I do is understanding that that's everyone's human, right? Yeah. But I like to say I got disappointed one too many times. And
haven't we all?
Right? Right? But it's no fault but our own because we've decided to project something onto them in a way that, our expectations are not being met. And so I think it's a beautiful humbling and understanding and a way to better relate to people and understand that, yes, these people can be of power or leadership or mentorship or whatever it is, but they're still human and they still have their shit going on. And that's what I'm very passionate about. And it's like, I don't work in the realm of like, gotcha. It's more like, hey, like, let's be...
Like wake up call.
Yeah, and let's bring more of the humanity into it. Like, let's bring less shame in the sense and more curiosity about like, well, why do we do things that we don't want to do? Like, it's a very interesting aspect of being human.
Why do we do things we don't want to do?
Well, again, I feel like it's very unconscious. And I think that's like, it's the patterns, right? It's like something served us to be able to meet a need. And then now we're moving into a space where we're understanding it's no longer serving us. But what we normally do instead of facing it is we begin to numb it. We begin to distract ourselves. We begin to avoid ourselves.
Just accept this.
Move into it, because what normally happens with those patterns and those complexes is it's from a moment in time when we were unable to process that. And so it's time to process that. But if that is like a very deep pain that we have suppressed, I mean, if we're pleasure moving sort of like species, it makes sense that we're going to avoid the pain, even if it is at the detriment to how we see ourselves and who we want to be.
And really what you want to do in life.
Exactly.
I talk about the hard road constantly.
Yeah.
The hardest things that I've ever done and the most difficult times in my life have elevated me the 10, 20, 50, 100-fold.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's almost like getting out of your own way. So what's the one thing
it's getting in your way, not out, because out is the mistake. Out is move. People try and go around it. It doesn't work. Like, you have to move through it. And for men particularly, if you've grown up in societies and been conditioned that experiencing emotion is a sign of weakness.
I always thought that when I was young.
You were?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yes, I mean I covered up a lot of emotional turmoil from I did 12 years in law enforcement.
Yeah.
In the United States. Law enforcement in the United States is not fun.
Yeah.
It's you know what I mean? It's a tough job. And in a relationship that I was in through most of my law enforcement career, I never shared anything. And I would come home, and I remember, and this was my ex, probably my longest relationship ever, actually. We got married. It was a horrible idea to get married, and we were friends, and we got annulled. It wasn't even married long enough to get a divorce. But she told me, she's like, you'd come home after working a weekend, and she's like, and the TV be on, but you'd be staring at the wall, and just like, because I was trying to process, and I wouldn't communicate with her because I was like, I don't want to get emotional. I don't want to lay this on her because I was taught that wasn't the right thing to do.
Exactly. And I think this is why, and I may be biased, but why it could be valuable to work with me is because, and I've been reflecting on this.
Sure.
Because I was having a conversation recently with people around men showing emotion in their relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear...
So men do have emotions.
Pardon?
Men do have emotions.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. It's just real drop. Drop this bomb on
So.
people.
It's going around.
It's going around, yeah.
I hear women say that they'd like their men to communicate more in terms of their emotions and how they're feeling. But I also hear that when men do this, women don't like that. And that's a huge generalization.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's some form of conflict with that, right? And so I find the space in which I create is like a confidential space to be able to possibly get the messier side of integration out.
Yeah.
And then you can move into your relationship in a way that's a lot more grounded. You can still be emotive.
Yeah.
But I think because women depend on men to be that stable ground for most relationships,
Sure.
it can be, as much as we say that we want to be open to this, it can be a little jarring and creates uncertainty and a subconscious sense of lack of safety, right? Within the relationship.
Yeah, because an emotionally turmoil man it looks unsafe.
Looks unsafe and it feels unsafe in a very genuine and nature-based way. So I find when you say, you know, what are the common things, a lot of it is around relationships and being able to articulate to me what's going on. And we move through the messiness, and it's a lot easier because I don't have any self-interest in this space. Mm-hmm. And then they're able to integrate in a way where they go back into their relationship in a more grounded way. It doesn't mean that they're not emotive.
Sure.
If anything, they're a more true version of themselves because they can see clearly, because they've been able to process what they're not used to processing in the space with me first.
Sure. Well, men can be emotional and emote without being out of control.
Yes.
And that's the thing. It's like, you know, women are supposed to be the more emotional creatures of the two, right? We're supposed to be more in control. You're supposed to be more emotional. Yin and yang, we work really well together, right? But a man that is emoting, and we've been taught this, especially Western culture, and probably a lot of the culture here in Dubai as well, right?
Yeah.
Because masculinity is put on a very high pedestal.
Yes.
So it's like, you know, anything that may be perceived as feminine or non-masculine is basically shoved away.
Yeah.
And it completely erodes communication and relationship, where men have to be able to be, men have to be able to cuddle. We have to be able to sit there and hug our woman and kiss them and tell them we love them, and all these things are very important because women need and crave that.
They do.
Where if a man has that wall up and the coldness, that's when you have the separation in the relationship.
But with the wallness and coldness, and we see this manifesting in life at the moment, I know particularly in Australia, it's a topic of conversation. What you resist persists, right? And so if you're suppressing all of that emotion, it doesn't just sit there dormant. Yeah. It ignites. And that's when we get rage. That's when we get domestic violence. This is when we get those unhinged moments where men, and I've been in a relationship like this, where I see this, like the eyes change, right? And that unconscious part of them takes over. And they, in a very unconscious way, communicate in that rage or in that domestic violence kind of space. But then what I see is it goes up and then it goes down. Sure. And so what ends up happening is they then cry, or they then sort of go into a bit more of a meeker version of themselves. And this is what opens up the space for communication around these things. Because I think judgment is like a really dangerous space to be in when you're wanting to transform things. And so in that space, I think it's very interesting, rather than just have the conversation of men coming out with rage and violence, particularly in the relationship space, is to go further back and ask why. And I think a huge part of that reason is because men have learnt to suppress their emotions. But your body wants a space of vitality. Going back into that congruent space, it wants that flow. So there's going to be moments where it's wanting to eject that energy that is trapped within your body. And it's unfortunate because a lot of men will just lose their shit rather than understanding that, enable to process that energy, they're going to be able to come into a more grounded space. And that doesn't mean they don't get angry. Anger is a very important part of communication, but it's in a conscious and intentional way.
Well, it's not just
going out sideways.
It's in control.
Exactly.
Yeah. What you're talking about is that fire that starts burning and burning and burning, and You keep feeding it. You keep feeding it. You're not letting it go. You're not letting it kind of just dissipate.
Yes.
And then that turns into an explosion, and that's the lack of emotional control.
Yes.
And that's the worst thing that a man can do.
And would you say that's masculine?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I think are you familiar with Jordan Peterson?
Yeah.
I love what he said when he talked about how he believes men should be, and he talks about a man should be extremely dangerous and capable of great violence and bodily harm, but be the most controlled human.
Yeah.
And I think it's like the gardener at war or the warrior in the garden.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
But that's how men should be.
Yes.
I consider myself highly capable, but I'm a big teddy bear.
Yeah.
I'm a big teddy bear,
Yeah.
but have you ever seen, you look at a bear, it's like, oh, you want to cuddle the bear.
Yeah.
Well, you don't cuddle the bear because you piss him off, he's going to rip your head off.
Exactly.
That's how men should be.
Yes.
But it's a controlled measure, it's precise. If a man operates in that way, I consider that very masculine. But he has to be able to be, it's not this macho bravado bullshit.
Well, it's bullshit, right?
It is bullshit.
Yes. And I think that's what's beautiful to bring into the space is more awareness that that is bullshit.
What? You can see it clear as, I can see it clear as day. I know you can see it. If you see the guy that walks with his chest puffed out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wearing sunglasses and it's nighttime. What the fuck are you doing?
The sunglasses
Do you understand what I'm
nighttime.
saying? Listen, unless we're singing the song Sunglasses at Night and it's an 80s party, take your fucking sunglasses off. It's just crazy. But that macho bravado demeanor, I've had communication with women, and they're like, I've been fooled multiple times by men that I perceived as masculine because they portrayed it in this way. Yes,
and that's why it's important for women and men, but in this example, to be more discerning and more in touch with their intuition.
Yeah.
And I'm very passionate about that. And I live my day-to-day, moment to moment, in relation to my intuition. And I would like people to value that more. And I also speak about that in terms of the masculine space. Mm-hmm. Every single successful man I've worked for, when I've asked them how they have made the most important decisions in their life, every single man answers gut instinct / intuition.
I was just going to say gut instinct.
Right?
What do I talk about all the time, Gary? Well, my gut tells me.
But why it's so interesting, right? Because I feel like you would say it's comfortable to be able to speak about gut, but why isn't it comfortable to speak about intuition? And going into the broader perspective of things that we are comfortable in speaking with in relation to different genders particularly, it fascinates me because I know you're very similar in the sense of why. We like to ask why.
Yes.
If something is shamed, then I'm like, why? And I think it's because if men were to live more aligned with not only that gut instinct, but that intuition, I can discern the difference. It's like men would be so much more powerful because I believe that's a signal in relation to how they live their sense of truth and how they are to be the most powerful versions of themselves. But of course, we don't want that. We want to tell you that intuition is feminine.
Yeah.
And so if you're being a masculine man, then you're like, well, I'm not going to be intuitive. That's just silly nonsense.
I never looked at intuition as feminine. Who's thinking? That's the thing.
I've heard it multiple times. I see men retract around it at times. Yeah. This
I always thought
gut,
of them the
it's
same.
very the same.
I thought of the gut instinct and the intuition the same thing.
Well, that's good. Like, I mean, for me, this is semantics, right? The way in which I feel it is like gut is more of those like bigger decisions or life-altering moments. Okay. Intuition is a bit more of that flow throughout the day, maybe in relation to a bit more of those smaller decisions. It's like, do I want a single espresso? Do I want a double espresso?
Clearly double every time for me.
But it's like we can bring that and be able to utilize that into a small decisions like that. And I like to say, like, when we get into our mind and we feel stuck within our mind, it's like, I always say there's always more than one answer, but intuition and gut will always tell you one. But there's something within our society that complicates this space. And we like to get stuck in the analysis rather than being able to drop in and be like, what feels true for me right now?
Where does that intuition and gut feeling, obviously if we talk about gut feeling, you talk about that feeling in your gut. It's not actually your gut, but so that gut feeling, that intuition, is that the brain or is that the heart, soul?
To me, I feel like it's exactly what I spoke to in the sense of like, it's God's path or your path of truth.
Yes.
I feel like we all have a unique energetic signature that we're here to honor, and it is here in every moment of our lives, whether we want to connect with it or not. And I believe that that path of truth is the path to you being most powerful version of yourself and the most fulfilled. Mm-hmm. Where people make the mistakes is they think that means it's going to be easy, that means it's going to be pain-free. And what I've experienced in living, I would say for the last year and a half on that path of truth, a lot of the time it's anything but that.
It's almost exactly that.
Yeah.
it's actually exactly that thing. Yeah. When you're really focused, you're the tip of the spear, which means you're going through walls, you're going through doors, it's gonna hurt. And
also you're supported. And I think that's the most beautiful thing, is that throughout all of those obstacles and difficulties and hard times, there's still this feeling that you're held.
Sure.
And I think that has helped me because I've experienced anxiety, depression, I've had an eating disorder. Like I've really gone down that route when I didn't have that in my life. And I've found like that has just been so potent and valuable and everything in my life in terms of being able to keep me as centered as possible in those moments of difficulty, in those dark nights of the soul, when even I'm questioning the purpose of things and what I'm doing here, having that belief to fall back on has been power.
Okay. So if that intuition and gut is coming from God's path, the soul, your purpose, if it's coming from there, and all of that questioning and all of that hyper-evaluation, over-evaluation, overthinking, that's a lot of obviously it's coming from your brain, but where are we being inundated? Is that the societal way? Is that the...
Of course, because if you're not able to connect with your truth, then all you are is swimming in your brain around the different options that have been conditioned into you.
Yes.
Perfect. Oh, you're a confused person that now is experiencing anxiety and depression, and now we're going to sedate you. And then we can control you. I understand that medication for some people work. Do your thing.
Do you? Do you? I have a problem with it a little bit.
Well,
this is
the thing. It depends how connected you want to be in life. And this is what I'm speaking about when it comes to path of truth, right?
Sure.
Because I've had, I would say, 3 dark nights of the soul. And what I've learned from this is that people have this, to me, an inaccurate understanding of what life is. And so if they feel even an extended period of suffering, sense of suffering in their life, they think something is wrong. To me, it's a message. It's always a message. It's always a signal. And it is our role in this life, and this is where my meaning is derived, to be like, if anything out of my control is of service to me, and that's what I believe, every single thing that happens, whether I can call it bad or good, I believe that it's of service to me. And my role is to be able to understand, why am I having an extended period right now where I don't feel like myself, or I don't feel good feelings, or anything I do isn't changing this feeling. My purpose isn't to go get medicated. My purpose is to be able to really be with that. And I think for my personal story, I had a very dark night of the soul last year, and it was around my sense of achievement. And I got fucking flattened. My brain stopped working for 10 months. I used to read books. 10 months. I used to read books. I used to listen to podcasts. I used to do courses. And for 10 months, my brain just stopped. I could not read a paragraph. Really? And I had to be with myself and learn that so much of my value was placed on my ability to intake knowledge, articulate knowledge. And I had to be in a space and recognize, one, I'm not that very special either. The world kept going and not much changed. So that was a beautiful lesson as well, right? To understand, well, if that's the case, then am I really making the impact that I'm here to make? So that was beautiful. 2, finding value in myself when I can just sit and be and really understand what that feels like. That when I feel like I'm not doing the very thing that I've derived my worth from a very young age, it's like I get to actually see and meet the real me. So there's lessons, but sometimes it takes time, because I had a lot of resistance to that at the start.
Sure.
So it's like the more I resist, the more it extends, because life is here. If it's of service to me, it's teaching me the lessons. But again, as I shared earlier, it's like you got to want it. You got to be open to the lessons. Otherwise, life's going to continue to kind of bring that sense of suffering into your life.
Was there a triggering moment that caused that 10-month stint? Specifically?
So I had moved to Dubai on intuition. And I like to sometimes do contract roles outside of my mentorship. I like variety. And I had picked up a contract role with some luxury real estate agents here where I was going to be supporting them in some of the work that they do. And we had organized it before I'd moved there. And when I moved here, in the first week we had a meeting, and I was sitting at the table with two said people, and they were discussing basically being very, I'll say the word, bitchy about people that they work with. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, if you're behaving like this about these people, then I'm assuming that you're going to be treating me like this when I'm not sitting at the table.
They're doing this right in front of you, they barely know you.
In front of me, yes. And then they said one thing which changed everything. The woman, after the stories that they were telling, the woman looked at me and she said, as you can see, we lie to make money.
Oof.
She said it directly. And
that just gave me the worst chills. That gave me actual chills, like in the worst way. I mean, did you feel the energy of them before you were in there, or when you first got in there?
Yes, but
did you ignore it?
No, because this is the thing. When it comes to intuition, what I've learned is this. When it comes to the path of truth, sometimes your truth will lead you into situations for you to learn certain lessons.
Of course.
So even if you feel like there is no longevity in that decision, there is purpose to it. And so I didn't go in thinking this is me for the however long.
Sure.
I went in being like, this is where I'm meant to be right now. I don't completely understand why.
Yeah,
and
you knew you were supposed to be there.
but I knew I was meant. And when she said that, I went, and that's a reminder of my own sense of integrity, that I will never, ever, money will never trump my own sense of integrity ever. And I've been tested multiple times in relation to this. I'd prefer to be out in the streets starving than to be in some high-powered money-making machine where I'm not connected to my own sense of truth. And so in that experience, it was a beautiful lesson to be able to continue to integrate that. That's something that I'm continually tested on.
And kudos to you on maintaining your honor and integrity, because
of course,
in a place where, and not that, I think Dubai is less of that place than LA, Miami, New York, maybe some places in Europe where it's basically hedonism and money is the ruler of all, you know, where a lot of people here, and I'm sure that does happen here as well.
Yeah.
Dubai is a very wealthy place, but it seems like a lot of people here are a little bit more grounded. Unfortunately, you met some that weren't.
Well, it just is, right? It's not unfortunately, it was just is. It was teaching that lesson.
It's real. It's real. It's out there, you know? So when you went through that lesson, that triggering moment, and you're going through those 10 months, because I think you highlighted a thing that a lot of people are going through. A lot of people have these moments where they're like, oh man, I'm in this lull, I'm in this place, I'm depressed, I have anxiety, I don't know what to do. Yeah. And then they not only hyper evaluate, they don't even really feel what they need to feel. They don't look at it as a lesson.
Yes.
And I look at everything as a lesson in a way of like, all the worst things that ever happened to me ended up being the best things that ever happened to me because I allowed them to.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. Yeah, I feel like it's very potent. I think that's where most people make the mistake out of my own beliefs, is like being able to understand that, like, if everything is of service to you, then don't feel like it's happening to you, or that you've done something wrong, or that you're being punished for something.
It's truly happening for you.
It is. And understand that, like, when I went into that depths of darkness last year, like, I did question living. I really did. I had moments where I was like...
Has everybody?
I think so, but I think people aren't willing to speak that which they fear to admit. And for me, that was a big moment to actually be like, even though I can be this really bubbly, jovial person, I've still experienced what it is to lay in bed at nighttime, look up at the ceiling and be like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm here to do. I don't know, like, what I'm doing here. I don't know what everyone else is doing here. Like, why, do you know what I mean? And it particularly, and I know you were very vocal during sort of more of the woke era. It was like that. It was very much facilitated.
The woke era.
I'm trying to move forward from that space.
Please stay in the past.
But that was part of my introduction into really feeling this sense of nihilism, was feeling like the things that I cared about and the things that I vocalized myself about felt so far removed from where I felt the world was heading and the leadership that was in power. And I had a really sort of difficult moment where I was like, I don't feel connected with life right now because I feel like the things that are important to me are being condemned, I'm being silenced, and then what's the point?
Do you think that people need to feel that in points in their life? I hate to say that forwardly.
Yeah.
Because I spoke about it, and you told me that you watched a podcast with Shako and I.
Yeah.
Actually filmed right around the corner. And Gary filmed that. And I spoke about that time that I had that dark moment when I was in law enforcement.
Yeah.
And, you know, I went through that place and I got close in that moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I made the decision. But I'm so grateful that it happened.
Beautiful.
I'm so grateful that it happened, and people sometimes don't understand that. And they evaluate it, and you know, they evaluate that perspective. Like, no, I don't want to feel that.
Yeah.
Do we need to feel that? Do we need to feel that as people to go through that dark time so we can realize there is light, so we can realize there is truth and life is worth it and all these things?
It's a beautiful question. I've been writing about this recently. I'm considering doing a bit of a solo podcast because I love to write poetically and sort of speaking some of these more
You definitely
deeper
should.
experiences.
By the way, you definitely should.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah. I would.
Thanks.
I would applaud. I would applaud the idea of you doing a solo podcast.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. And I was writing about this moment, and I said I realized in that moment that it wasn't about what I'm living for. It was about why do I not kill myself?
Oof.
And I feel like in that moment, it connected me with the things that are the most important to me as to why I would not do that.
Powerful.
And I think that within that experience, I do think it would be serving for people to have a moment like that. Because you realize no one's forcing you to be here. You're deciding to be here. But our sense of separation and a lack of meaning is derived from the fact that we've never truly had a moment in our lives where we've been able to connect with what we're here for.
I think nobody really evaluates it because it's almost like they've been told.
Well, this is the thing. It's like most people live a very monotonous life and many people are sedated. So it's like going back to this younger man. It's like, how is he ever to derive any sense of meaning when he's in the air of sedation?
Sure.
And, you know, it's going back to the idea that like meaning is derived from this sense of suffering. This is when we learn our deepest of lessons. So don't avoid it. Don't numb it. We walk right into the fire of that experience. But that's why it's good to be able to talk about these things, because we begin to understand more and more. And I've certainly experienced that more recently in my life as I begin to be more honest about my experience, is the amount of flooding in of communication from other people being like, holy shit, like I really needed that in that moment because I feel the truth of it all. Yeah. And I feel the reflection of your experience in mine that maybe I've been wanting to avoid because we live in this space of here's my best life. And then we all feel this sense of shame and retreat because we're like, well, what the fuck is wrong with me? Why doesn't my life look like that? Why don't I look as happy as this person?
I do the exact opposite.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I literally do. Like I hate that. I hate that people sit into that place.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because I use that as such a motivator and such a driver for me, where I don't necessarily compare. I don't do the comparison game, which I think is a toxic behavior. I think the comparison game to other people is not a good place to be. Can you get inspiration? Like, sure. I applaud success everywhere. So if I see, you know, if we're going to just be very surface level, if I see one of my friends or somebody I don't even know, and they buy some supercar and like, I find that to be cool. I'm a car guy. You know what I mean? So, or they buy I like watches. So, you know, my friend bought this crazy watch that I've wanted for years. I didn't get jealous or insecure or say, oh, why don't I have that? I applauded him. I was excited about it.
Yeah.
And I was also like, I'm buying that watch now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just drove me.
Yeah.
But the person that I look at in the mirror, when I look at myself, one, I have learned to be proud of myself, where I don't know if you've ever felt this, you know, and Cat's out of the bag. You're a good-looking woman. I'm not horribly ugly. I think.
Is that what you say to yourself in the mirror?
That's what I said.
Not horribly ugly.
It's weird for me to call myself handsome. I'm handsome. It's like so idiot.
Not horribly ugly, much better.
Yeah. So, I'm being humble.
Put it on your dating app.
I'm being humble. I'm not horribly ugly, date me. So, we're both good-looking people. But back in the day, I was insecure. I've had insecurities, and I've looked at myself in the mirror, and I didn't like what I saw.
Of course.
Where now I look at myself in the mirror, and I'm like, proud of myself.
Yeah.
And I like what I see.
Yeah.
And there's some days where it's a little more difficult.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, all right, having a rough one. And that's when I practice gratitude and things like that.
Yeah.
And, I make sure I do gratitude practice every day.
Yeah.
And, I get into this place where I compare the person in the mirror to who I am now. Okay. And then I turn this person in the mirror and I visualize like that superhero version of myself. What am I like, or who do I want to be when I'm 100% optimal? I don't look at that. I look at it as a measuring stick. I don't look at it as, man, I'm screwing up.
Yeah.
I'm really not doing enough. It's like, no, I'm making choices. Did I make a choice to watch a movie instead of keep working? Yes,
Right.
I did. That's okay.
Yes.
I made that choice.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have a really hard time looking at that version of themselves, or looking at the version of themselves they aspire to be to, and they just demean themselves from there.
Yes.
Why aren't I this?
And I find what's come to me is when you begin to live on this path of truth that feels authentic to you, what I like to talk about is this idea of boundaries. And when you live congruent to yourself and not to conditioning, there is a rite of passage that happens. That rite of passage is, in order to be able to formulate your own boundaries, you have to go past them. Does that make sense to you?
To formulate your own boundaries, you have to go past them.
So in order to know where your edge is in relation to anything that you do in life,
Okay.
you need to go past it.
Okay.
Which means you've gone further than where you may identify yourself as.
Understood.
What you want to do.
You're talking about your personal boundaries for success.
Completely.
Okay.
Relationships, whatever it is.
Okay, sure.
And so to understand that, because what happens, right, when you live in your path of truth, this is my experience. When I live on my path of truth and I go I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn where my lines are now, not what's been drawn for me. I have to go outside to understand that's not for me. And that space in there is incredibly important, because that's where we learn to have more self-compassion for ourselves.
That space inside is a comfort zone. That's it's the new comfort zone in your own sense of truth. Because if society has built those lines, yes, it's your comfort zone. Sure.
But if you're now drawing your own lines, it's not necessarily comfortable. It's what is true. There's a difference. And when you go past that is when there is discomfort, because you go into this space of I learned through my own experiences. Like when you live on your path of truth, you can't expect this air of perfection in everything you do.
Yeah.
But part of that is understanding that you will make mistakes. You will go outside the lines to understand where your own lines are now. And I've had to develop within myself a sense of being able to connect with that idea that there will be things throughout my life on my path of truth where I do things that don't feel true to me, to understand where that line of truth is.
Is the path to perfection bad? Can it be perceived negatively, or do you perceive it negatively? Because I don't. I love looking at the perfect version of myself or something, or I love looking at that, knowing in reality that I will more than likely never reach that. But if I even get to 20% of that, I already beat everybody else.
I think if you have a self-aware relationship to it, it can be okay in understanding that you will never meet it.
Yeah.
I've certainly gone through a period in my life of moral perfectionism. And I think that has been quite detrimental to me.
Explain moral perfectionism. What do you mean?
In kind of, I guess, moral perfectionism, and or if I'm living my path of truth, if I even decide to kind of go a bit rogue, there's an air of self-punishment that comes in.
Shaming yourself?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Because if I'm so connected with this, then why am I going over here when it says to go over here? And I've learned that that's the celebration of being human, is actually being able to derail sometimes and be able to remind yourself what it feels like to go off that path as well.
Yeah. And if you think about it, that if you know your path and you're always your path, if your path is completely known, that's a straight line. thinking that you're going to walk that straight line perfectly for your entire life is insanity. There's no way. You're going to curve.
You will
You're
always
You're going to curve into doing some stupid shit.
Yes.
Or having a decision that you thought would be fun and maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was. Who cares?
It sounds obvious though, but a year or so ago, I did a contract where I was coaching some coaches in their personal lives. And you'd be very surprised at how many people this affects when they're in leadership positions. It's like they move into the space of coaching, mentorship, any form of leadership. And the pressure and expectations that people put on themselves to be able to be completely perfect because they are the leader that people come to for their advice or for their wisdom or knowledge is very fascinating. That the block and the blind spot of it is that they don't allow for their own humanity. And that is such a big lesson in being a leader, is being able to make space for your own humanity, which may be slightly that imperfect side, but to be able to develop a relationship with it.
Why are you even coaching or developing people or even talking about this in the first place? Probably because you screwed it up somewhere. I tell it to people all the time because I've had several people actually ask me, what gives you the right to talk about relationships and why do you talk about it? Why are you? I'm like, oh my God, I screwed enough up to know what mistakes are out there, you know? And I'm trying to help people, you know, and I'm sharing the experiences is also therapeutic to me.
Yeah, beautiful.
Like when I talk about doing this right now, this is like my therapy. Having a real conversation with someone and us putting out information for people to absorb, to learn from this. Like, I love this stuff. This is fun. I don't make money from this stuff. This is not money. You know? For me, this is passion, this is fulfillment. Whatever comes from this, if we impact one person.
Right. And this is the thing, and I posted a reel about this recently. I was on a Mateo's podcast, and I spoke about, particularly when you are in a space of impact and you know, somewhat of a public space, it's so important not to listen to any of that. Like, and it's a very simple idea, but I think it sets a lot of people back, including myself until very recently, is like being able to compartmentalize those people that are trying to pull you away from your own path of truth, as I call it, like shaitan, right, from the Muslim religion.
100%.
It's just whispers of shaitan trying to pull you off your path. And to be able to compartmentalize that and not be distracted by that, because the bigger that you get or the more impact that you have, the more that those whispers are going to be coming.
Oh, yes.
And it's like, do we focus on every single person asking why you're talking on relationships? Or do we focus on our path of truth and be able to connect with the ones that are there to listen? And that's our most important piece in terms of what we're committed to.
Are you religious?
I'm spiritual.
Okay. What does that mean?
I am not connected with any established religion. I do believe in a higher presence that guides me, that I call God.
Sure.
Anything further than that, I'm not wrapped up in.
Gotcha.
And I'm not attached to. It's just what feels true for me and what I've felt like since deciding to truly live my life in relation to that. And as I said, that I feel like it's channeled through me, which it is for everyone. I feel like I see the magic of life in a way that I've never experienced before.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talk about religion a lot. I love religion because I love understanding or trying to understand what man believes about God. I don't think any religion necessarily has it right. I think probably every religion has it wrong.
Well, it's very fascinating, right? Like we see some of the conflicts that's happening around the world, and it's mind-boggling to me that we can create conflict and war over the beliefs that we stand by. Well,
especially when you look at who's actually warring, and you know, you look at Islam and Judaism and Christianity, they're all Abrahamic religions. They're all technically worshiping the same God.
Stemming from the same,
It's silly. We call it silly. I understand people are very serious about it, and I'm not you know, challenging anybody's belief on what you feel about the other religions, but I was born Roman Catholic. I have read the Bible multiple times. I just read the Quran for the 4th time. And I'm very versed on Abrahamic religions. I've studied some of the Eastern religions. I don't identify with any of them. However, I have a cross on here. And in my bag inside there, I also have a Quran, a mini Quran. I'm like, well, what are you? What does it matter?
Well, this is the thing, and it's like I think there's a space in which we can just stay in our own lane and respect that others can stay in theirs.
I love people that are doing good things.
Yes, and
That's
I think
the
this
real
is the thing. When people don't face themselves, they face you and then project onto you. And so people are concerning their time with, well, why is there some form of conflict in my assumption of what I believe to be true that I'm going to project onto you rather than actually just stay in my lane? And if I am a religious person, then why don't I live in my own sense of peace?
Yeah. You're asking a lot here. You're asking a lot of people.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I always like to go back to, is like catching myself if I'm ever judgment of that, and being able to pull myself back into that state of curiosity. Just people of humanity are very fascinating.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, I want to get just a couple questions on your background. How did your global travel and your cultural diversity that you experienced, how did that shape your mind in doing what you're doing now? Because you're very, you're very astute. You seem to know what you're talking about when it comes to how humans interact, and people that don't really get out into the world kind of have a little bit of trouble with that.
Yeah.
So how did your global approach and your global, you're a global person, right? What do we call this? Global citizenship. You're a global
citizen. A woman of the world.
You're a global citizen.
Yes.
How did that help your spiritual depth, and how did that help you understand humans and men better?
Beautiful question. Many things. I think one of the most interesting aspects of it is wherever I've gone, I've stayed, I've been to Kenya multiple times. I've lived in Tunisia in North Africa. I've lived in Istanbul in Turkey. I live here.
She's well traveled here. He raises eyebrows. I was like, wow, damn.
Yeah, I've really had some potent experiences and been there grounded, not just kind of fleeting through. And so whether I'm in a Menyetta in the middle of the Rift Valley in Kenya, or somewhere in Tunisia when the protests are happening, or Istanbul just after the coup when no foreigners were there, it's I begin to learn that one, what I've noticed is, because we talk about religion and spirituality, wherever I was, I very much had a desire to be a part of something with someone. And so even in India, I've been multiple times and spent a lot of time there. It's when I'm there, I fall into the space of Hinduism. And I am there chanting and praying. When I'm here, I've also read the Quran. I've very much lent into their teachings, which has been incredibly helpful. And I'm in that space living in Dubai. And it's I've been in Australia, and I've been more of that Catholic sort of approach. And what I understood was I
love that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But it's the lesson is in, I think, despite all the noise on top of everything, I think fundamentally underneath what I see within myself and the pattern amongst each other is that we want to be connected with each other. And sometimes maybe we can not completely understand how to do that, but it's these things that draw each other together that we can begin to feel ourselves again. And I think that is that sentience aspect that's very important to me that I've seen globally, is at the end of the day, whether we have different cultures, religions, whatever it is, we're all made up of the same stuff. And yes, we can get sort of bogged down in the idea of biological stuff and all of that. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, we're all seeking very similar things in different ways. And I think to have more compassion of that. And I think that's how I bring it into my mentorship, is as I said to you, in more of a humorous way, I've been disappointed one too many times. And I think that's been very helpful to understand that no one is higher than anybody else in this lifetime, nor are they lower. And we're all doing the best that we can with the awareness that we have. And if we can be in a space of being able to articulate and convey and be very honest in our own experiences of being human, I like to write, as I said, and it's if you can find one person to not feel alone, that's that can fundamentally change your life, to be able to relate to somebody. And so I think that's part of my piece, is not only my mentorship, but now coming on more podcasts, is to be able to be relatable in a way to be able to have people to feel that you're not alone in this world, no matter where you are and what you're experiencing, at whether you are one of the wealthiest people here in Dubai or one of the poorest in India. We're still fighting very similar battles at just different levels. And I think the lessons are always going to be the same, no matter where you are in that spectrum.
Well said. All right. Rapid fire questions. We're going to wrap
See
up.
how good I am at rapid fire.
We're going to see. It's okay.
You're like, that was rapid fire.
We can extend this. Yes, you already did it. You just did rapid fire right there. It was perfect. Okay. For everybody watching, one daily ritual that you find powerful that you would suggest for people?
Praying. I pray every time I eat, which is around 5 times a day. So I'll give thanks for my food, and I have like a little spiel that I say. But then I will also take a point after that spiel to be able to connect with how I'm feeling in that moment, and to be able to articulate what it is, what's going on in my mind, and just kind of like be a lot more present to my experience. And it makes me a lot more, going back to what we spoke about earlier, that air of consciousness. It just makes me a lot more conscious in the way that I relate to myself, and then by virtue of that, relate to others.
Fantastic. Most powerful book? You can give a couple if you're stuck on just one.
I love the book by James Hollis called Why Good People Do Bad Things.
Okay.
That's been a very interesting book. I love a book by Connie Zweig, I think her name is. It's like a culmination of books on shadow work. I think it's like called Into the Shadow or something. That's been a very pivotal book. I like books that surround the dark side of human nature, not necessarily in terms of evil, but just kind of like the suppression of, our wholeness.
Sure.
And how that relates to the behaviors in which we do in those moments that potentially we tell ourselves we don't want to be doing and things like that. I find that really fascinating, those aspects.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
A belief about success that you've let go of?
Can I elaborate a little bit on this one?
Please. Have at it.
So we hear the cliche saying that most of us who have goals have this idea that when we get here, we're going to feel a certain feeling. And we all understand it. It's a very simple concept. I do believe you will never understand until you experience it. And I had a moment very recently where I was here in Dubai. I was in my fancy car, going to a fancy place to meet a fancy person.
Fancy things everywhere.
Getting paid well.
Yeah.
And I had this moment where I was sitting in the car and I thought, I spent a lot of time in Sydney before this. And I thought, if I was in Sydney and I'd thought, hey, imagine if I lived in Dubai and I was in a fancy car going to a fancy place to talk to a fancy person and get paid for it. When I thought about it, I was like, oh my God, like gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
How amazing.
Yeah, this would be the best thing ever.
My life
Yeah.
would be exactly where I want it to be.
Yeah.
And I would feel all the feelings that I associate that. And what I realized in that moment, as I was sitting in that car to that place, I did not feel any different. And I thought, wherever you go, there you are. And it is always on us to be able to develop that own sense of experience within ourselves and not rely on the external, because that's the lesson, is that we convince ourselves that the next best thing is going to give us a particular feeling that we can bring into our life right now. And that was very humbling for me to understand that I thought I was pretty across things like that. But what I realized is I'm very across the simple things and being grateful for the simple things.
Sure.
But these larger things that I put so much energy into, like when was going to be the point until which I would feel different?
Yeah.
And it was the lesson in that I'm not as grateful in those moments for some reason, and to bring the presence and gratitude back into that space.
It's a great lesson. That's amazing. What's next for you for 2025, 2026 moving forward? Besides your solo podcast, which you're definitely going to do. Okay. I'm pushing you to this for sure.
I appreciate
I'll
that.
harass you. I'll be sending you DMs. I'll send you messages every
Until
other day.
Until you hear it and you're going to be like, it's pretty raw. And that's part of the hesitation in my lesson. And I think that ties into your question, is going back to what I feel is that path of truth and what God channels through us. I've always had a very natural ability to write in a certain way that I feel like connects with people. And I've held myself back from sharing a lot of this, even in the way that I speak, because I feel like I'm too intense or too much. And what I'm recognizing is, I think a lot of last year was about the fact that I was relying too much on other people's wisdom to hide behind, rather than to be able to sit in this chair right now and speak from my own sense of truth. And I don't think I've said one word to you that I've learned off anyone else but myself. And that's the difference.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. It's all come from here, but going back to these lessons of these like darker moments in our life, it's all spoken from that place.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm very newly moving into the space of feeling much more confident and grounded in being able to share my authenticity in a much more wholesome way, rather than, as I speak to, this more performative way, which may land a little bit more gentle with people, but it's not authentic.
Yeah.
And so I see sort of the next year being me leaning into that space of being able to be as much of who I feel I truly am as possible, and learning how to not be good, okay for everyone. And I think I've lived a lot of my life. I think I've had moments where I've kind of gone out of the box.
Sure.
But I feel like over the next year is about actually really leaning into that space and being able to work through being unliked for who I truly am, rather than liked for who I am not.
So if you think Jennah-Louise punched you in the face with some stuff today, it's going to get worse. We're excited about this. I can't wait to do. We're doing a follow-up podcast a year from now. I'm going to be like, oh God.
Like, I have no friends.
I have no friends. Please come. Can I come on the podcast for coffee? I'm excited
double
for
espresso.
it. I did double espresso this time. Yeah, she's going to be more excited. I love that. The pure authentic self is what really people are so afraid of and people really need. I'm excited for you to really dive into that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think it helps having people like you supportive.
Yeah.
I think
I applaud it.
You need the people around you to be able to, well, for me anyway, I feel like I do really well with that reflection.
Yeah. That's the most important thing. It's the most beautiful thing. I love to see it.
Yeah.
And people should be confident in that. And I think you are. I think you've gotten to that place.
Yeah. I feel more grounded than I ever have, which is, I'm very, going back to pride, as you said, when you look in the mirror and you feel like proud of yourself.
Yeah.
I feel proud of myself.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Final question.
Okay.
If you could leave
How good are the rapid fire?
Yeah. The rapid fire is right. It's a whole other podcast. Final question. If you could leave one truth for the next generation of leaders, what would it be?
To be able to understand that we have all been conditioned in a certain way to be able to survive and operate in society. And there'll be a point into which you get where you begin to feel unfulfilled in things that maybe had you feel fine in the past. And that's the first signal to be able to understand that the first part of your life is a lot around that conditioning aspect of fitting in. And the next part of your life is about unveiling, and I call it the savage undoing of all of that, and having the courage and bravery to be able to connect with your own sense of truth and live from that. And understand that living from your own sense of truth and on that path, it's not going to be easy. It's not always going to be pleasurable. You're not always going to be happy, but that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that. And to be able to really lean into that. And I think the more people that you surround yourself with that live on that path, it does in a sense make it easier. But I think always find that grounding within yourself, within that sense of gut instinct and intuition that we speak to, and just trust that things will unfold. You won't always know where you're going and where you're being led. And I think that is part of the lesson that I've learned is about faith. Faith isn't leaning into your gut and intuition and having things always go the way that you want, but it's understanding in those darker moments when you feel the absence of God itself, that is just a test of faith for you. And for us to understand faith, we have to understand what it feels like to not be wholly supported all the time, and to be able to be grounded within that space and then move through that space and be able to continue to integrate into that sense of congruence out of fragmentation that comes from conditioning, and be able to just realign as much as possible, and to be able to have a sense of self-forgiveness and compassion when you're not always true to who you are. But just keep the awareness there.
Fantastic. Jennah-Louise, where can people find you? Where can they find you? Where
question.
can they find your podcast?
On a mountain somewhere out of reception.
Yeah, out of reception.
Uncontactable.
Don't text me. Where can
I have
they
like
find you?
160 unread messages.
Oh my goodness. I'm happy that we connected. It was almost impossible, apparently.
It's an energy
The fact
thing.
she's even here is just ridiculous. So where can they find your YouTube? Where can they find your IG? Not your phone number, clearly, because you're not going to respond to them.
It's interesting. And, that's part of my growth and exploration right now is like, I am currently moving through this aspect of inner conflict between wanting to be seen and wanting to hide.
Ooh.
And so, yeah, if you look at my Instagram, for example, like I don't really put myself out. So I would say Instagram, go and land there.
Sure.
And then, there you can get to my website and you can contact me.
Yeah, which she won't respond to, ever.
No, I will. Well, if it feels true.
If it feels real, that's right. And your YouTube.
Yeah, I have a YouTube. I used to have a podcast called To Be Human. I haven't actually posted on that in about a year. So I have a YouTube. I think it's under Jennah-Louise, but I haven't posted in a very long time. Mm-hmm. It might get reactivated when I do the solo podcast.
It will get reactivated. I'm going to give her this positive energy. She's going to do it. We need to see. I'm not going to let you escape through a mountain with no service. Because people need to hear what you're saying. I think it's really important. It's really important. I really love your perspective. I think that you can really help people.
Yeah.
I love that you're dedicated to helping men get through these things that are paining men all the time. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So yeah, drop on the Instagram or the website and we'll see what happens, inshallah.
All right, guys. Don't expect to read on the DM. Yeah. She's leaving you on red. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Appreciate it. Thank you.